Eyewitness accounts of the killing of MP Jo Cox and claims the accused shouted, "Britain first." Members of her family heard claims that Thomas Mair repeatedly stabbed and shot the 41-year-old mother of two, then calmly walked away. Also this lunchtime, Sir Norman Bettison has his say over claims he was part of a Hillsborough cover-up. The families of the victims say he deserves no sympathy.
He should be stripped of his knighthood, and he should be just plain old Norman.
A cold spell and Halloween help boost retail sales with a mini boom, but the outlook is less cheery. And DiCaprio brings a bit of Hollywood glamour to the lives of the homeless in Edinburgh.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. A taxi driver, Rashid Hussain, told the court he saw Thomas Mair stab Jo Cox 5 or 6 times and shoot her. He said he saw the MP's assistant nursing her, pleading for her to get up. Another witness, David Honeybell, had gone to see the Labour MP at her constituency surgery. He said the accused man stood over her, cocked his gun and blasted her. The jury also heard that Mair shouted, "This is for Britain," and put Britain first during the alleged murder. Mair denies all charges. Richard Pallow with the details.
Jo Cox's family at the Old Bailey this morning. Her mother, father and sister arriving together again, supporting one another ahead of more revelations about the MP's very last moments. Several witnesses in her constituency of Batley and Spen have described the moment they saw Jo Cox shot, stabbed and the immediate aftermath. Taxi driver Rashid Hussain recounted how he heard what sounded like a firecracker and then approached Thomas Mair, the man accused of her murder. He said to the defendant, "What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" Mair replied, "Move back, otherwise I'm going to stab you." Hussain then told the jurors that he shot twice. He moved back and shot again. David Honeybell had gone to see Jo Cox at her constituency surgery, but as he turned up, he saw her shot at close range. In evidence, he said Mair stood over her, cocked his gun and blasted her. He just walked away with not a care in the world. Another witness described the 53-year-old as a dishevelled old man. When he was arrested, a knife and a sawn-off gun were found in the holdall he was carrying. Mair denies all the charges. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
And Rupert Evelyn has been in court for us. Rupert, lots of details there about the moment of the alleged attack and what happened next.
Yeah, this was a busy town centre around lunchtime and there were a lot of witnesses to this attack. One of them, Tracy Byford, said it was horrible what I saw. She said she went down, referring to Jo Cox, on the floor like a sack of potatoes. She said there was lots of shouting. There was, she said, I'm fairly sure, someone shouting Britain first. Julie Holmes is a cake shop owner just across the road from where the attack took place. She said she saw a glint of metal and realised that he was stabbing the lady, not punching her. And then she described the moment of shooting. She said, at that point I closed my eyes and I heard a really loud popping noise. Then she opened her eyes. She saw him messing with the top of the gun. He pointed it at the lady again and fired. He said that the man then looked at her in the eye. He lifted the gun, but not at her. In a gesture, it was as if she said he knew she was there. She said she was frightened that he would come towards them. And this afternoon, we are expected to hear from more witnesses who were in Birstall that lunchtime that day.
Rupert, thank you. A senior police officer at the centre of allegations of a cover-up following the Hillsborough disaster is publishing a book claiming that he's the victim of a witch hunt. Sir Norman Bettison is still under investigation over his role in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy. He claims there was never a conspiracy to blame supporters for what happened. But as Damon Green explains, families of those who died have reacted furiously to his comments.
I've been described as a monster, and the context for that description is Hillsborough.
Accused of being part of an organised attempt by South Yorkshire police to smear the victims of Hillsborough, Norman Bettison has always maintained his innocence. Now he's written a book. maintaining his innocence. A book about Hillsborough, a book about Norman Bettison.
You've written a book about Hillsborough, which is effectively a book about yourself, and you're styling yourself as the victim here. How do you have the neck to do that?
No, that isn't fair, because I go to great lengths to demonstrate the empathy that I have for the families who've struggled against false narratives for 27 years.
Victoria and Sarah Hicks both died at Hillsborough, and their father says an officer who was at the heart of South Yorkshire Police's response to the tragedy has no right to offer sympathy or to make himself the centre of attention.
He should be stripped of his knighthood, and he should be just plain old Norman.
Plain old Norman.
Plain old Norman. He should go away. He should stop looking for sympathy that he doesn't deserve, and he should stop trying to give us sympathy that we don't want when it's not meant.
At one stage, he was the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police. He says he wants people in Liverpool who blame him for a cover-up to read his book and change their minds.
For the last 100 pages, you're bleating effectively about what's happened to your good name.
Not bleating, setting the story straight. Wouldn't any of us, wouldn't you actually care if people were saying things about you that weren't true?
The chances of this man's book being a bestseller on Merseyside seem slim. Bookshops in Liverpool are already saying they won't be selling it. Damon Green, ITV News.
Plans to limit the power of the House of Lords have been scrapped by Theresa May. Changes to stop peers from vetoing legislation were imposed after last year's defeat of George Osborne's planned tax credit cuts. They were described by peers as an absurd overreaction. Well, our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is live at the House of Lords lobby for us in Westminster this afternoon. Carl, is this a case of the current government distancing itself from some proposals and decisions of the last government?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of that going on, and this also reflects this government's priorities with Brexit, and I think that is one of the reasons that they've had to put this plan in the box marked too difficult. As you say, it was George Osborne's defeat of plans to cut tax credits last October that led an angry David Cameron to commission this review by Lord Strathclyde. Since then, the government's been knocked back several times. In January, the Lords voted against plans to restrict trade union funding of political parties. In April, peers backed Lord Dubb's amendment to the immigration bill, forcing ministers to arrange the relocation of child refugees. Now, today's proposals that have been knocked back today, we're looking at a fairly narrow set of circumstances under which the Lords could reject government legislation, so-called secondary legislation. And the government has said they could bring them back if the Lords just down there don't behave. But the government at the same time admitted that they would be needing the Lords' help with the mass of Brexit legislation.
This House has an important role to play in scrutinising and revising legislation, and the government recognises this. As we find ourselves considering the legislation resulting from the decision of the British people to leave the European Union, the constructive approach this House has so far shown will be ever more important.
So where this leaves us is once again in a position where the government has said that it will reform the House of Lords down the corridor so that it can't overrule the elected House of Commons just over here. Once again, they have found it too difficult, and we are left with what is the biggest unelected parliamentary chamber in the world, helping to shape the laws that govern the country.
Carl, thank you. Figures published this morning suggest that we spent much more on the high street than at the same time last year. Sales in October rose 7.4%. That's the fastest year-on-year growth in more than a decade. Our economics editor, Norina Hertz, is here with me now. Big jump. What lies behind it?
There are really three reasons. The first is that September was unseasonably warm, which meant that people held off from buying their winter wardrobes until October, so more people went shopping for their warm clothes in October. The second reason is that because of the falling pound, we've seen more tourists coming to our high streets to do their shopping. So that's another part of it. The third reason is quite an interesting one. Halloween shopping has been went up massively this year. One supermarket chain said that their sale of Halloween goods went up by 20% this year. So, you know, pumpkins and ghouls are clearly keeping our shops going. And then there's really another, I think what's interesting is that when we thought about the EU referendum and the effect of the vote, a lot of people thought immediately people would stop shopping. And as I learned today from this retail expert, that isn't the case.
As far as the public are concerned, there's been no real impact on their pocket from the referendum vote. All the warnings are about things that are going to happen in the future, but not to them now. So what we've seen is that retail has been largely unaffected by that.
So he's talking about warnings there. What's your own view? Is this going to continue into the future?
We're not going to have increased sales in the future. And I say this really for one clear reason, because prices are going to go up. All indicators are. We've already seen some prices go up, from petrol to iPhones. That's going to continue into the new year. And the problem is that because nobody thinks that wages are going to go up by the same rate, we'll all start feeling the pinch pretty soon.
OK. Thank you, I think, for that, Norina. Still to come this lunchtime, the row over trees being cut down that has led to the arrest of 2 pensioners. And swapping Hollywood for haggis. Leonardo DiCaprio is in Edinburgh. But first, just over a week ago, many believed that Hillary Clinton was on the verge of making history. As we all now know, that's as close as it got. Beaten by Donald Trump for the US presidency, she's opened up for the first time about her defeat, admitting that at times all she'd wanted to do was curl up and never leave the house again. Jenny Longden has more.
She didn't manage to shatter the glass ceiling, and now, appearing in public for the first time since conceding defeat in the US election, Hillary Clinton sounded shattered.
Now, I will admit, coming here tonight wasn't the easiest thing for me. There have been a few times this past week when all I wanted to do was just to curl up with a good book or our dogs and never leave the house again.
Trump, the projected winner in North Carolina.
Following a shock defeat to Donald Trump, the man whose rhetoric had been negative throughout the campaign, she called for her supporters to unite with a positive message.
I know that over the past week, a lot of people have asked themselves whether America is the country we thought it was. The divisions laid bare by this election run deep. But please listen to me when I say this. America is worth it. Our children are worth it. Believe in our country, fight for our values, and never, ever give up.
While Mrs. Clinton called for supporters not to give up on their values, protests in Los Angeles shifted the focus from Donald Trump to his appointed chief White House strategist. Steve Bannon is credited as being a major force behind Trump's victory. He is alleged to have ties to white supremacist groups. The protests come as Mr. Trump prepares to meet Japan's Prime Minister, who will be the first foreign leader to meet with him since his victory. Shinzo Abe is stopping over in New York, keen to build trust with the new president. As Barack Obama arrives in Germany to assuage fears with European allies about the Trump presidency, many around the world are now asking what his tenure means for them. Jenny Longden, ITV News.
Here, car insurance bills could be cut by £40 a year as a result of a plan to crack down on compensation claims for whiplash. Claims for whiplash injuries have soared by 50% over the last decade, costing insurance companies around £1 billion a year. The government says insurers have pledged to pass on savings to drivers. And supermarket giant Asda's reported another big fall in sales. While results have slightly improved since its worst quarter ever in June, sales excluding fuel fell 5.8% in the 3 months to September. The former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg has waded into a row over chopping trees down in his constituency city of Sheffield. It follows the arrest of 2 pensioners who were involved in a standoff between police and workmen who turned up to fell trees in a residential street in the early hours of the morning. Well, Ben Chapman is live in Sheffield for us this lunchtime. What's the background to this row, Ben?
Well, there's been a long-running campaign in this street and in this city against council plans to chop down many of the mature trees that line Sheffield streets. And it came to a bit of a head here at about 4:30 this morning when residents got a knock at the door asking them to move their cars so that workmen who turned up alongside about a dozen police officers could start the work of clearing 8 of the trees. Now, this came to a bit of a standoff when 2 women in their early 70s refused to leave a cordoned off area and therefore prevented the workmen from getting on with the job. They were warned, they were then arrested and taken into police custody where it seems they remain. Now, I've been speaking to the husband of one of these women, Jenny Hockey, who says that the council's actions and the police's actions this morning are just unjustifiable.
The whole thing seems so heavy-handed. This pre-dawn raid, essentially, and just arc lights in the streets and chainsaws at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then all this heavy police presence just for something which could be done in a much more civilised way.
Now, he's been joined in his criticism by the former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, whose constituency is here in Sheffield. He called the council's actions pig-headed, and he tweeted this morning, very shocked to hear about Sheffield trees. Council actions are unjustifiable, underhand, and a waste of precious police resources. Now, the council, for its part, says that removing these unhealthy trees is vital maintenance work. They say they will plant extra trees in the street to replace the ones that they've cut down. And in terms of why they decided to take the action before dawn this morning, well, they say that was done on police advice to ensure safety.
Ben, thank you. Finally, he is definitely Hollywood royalty, used to dining in some of the world's finest restaurants. But Leonardo DiCaprio is having his lunch today in an Edinburgh restaurant which serves haggis, balls and mac and cheese. On his first visit to Scotland, he is at the Home restaurant, which gives its profits to the homeless. Nick Wallace reports on the excited fans who welcomed him to Scotland's capital.
This is what happens when a big Hollywood star lets it be known he's dropping by for lunch. Leonardo DiCaprio on Queensferry Street in Edinburgh, signing a few autographs for delighted fans.
It smelled amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was amazing.
You were that close?
Very close.
I'm obsessed with him. It's the best day of my life. Seriously, the best day of my life. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm gonna go for and I'm off for work.
Home is a restaurant which gives all its profits to homeless people and provides training and employment to former rough sleepers like Colin and Joe, who met Leonardo DiCaprio today.
Oh, well, it's something that not a lot of people get the opportunity to do. And I'm lucky to be one of them.
It's really down to earth, nice guy, really good guy.
The owners of Home clearly have a gift for publicity.
Hi guys.
Last year, George Clooney visited their first venture, a cafe called Social Bites, which donates all its profits to homeless people too. Although he wasn't giving interviews, Leonardo DiCaprio will be at the Scottish Business Awards later, giving his fans in Edinburgh a chance to catch yet more glimpses of their hero. Nick Wallace, ITV News.
And our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith is live in Edinburgh for us this lunchtime. Peter, he came, he saw, he conquered. What's he up to now?
That's right, well, he certainly conquered many of the hearts of his fans here. They have braved the cold for a long time, and let me tell you, Alistair, having been stood here for the last 3 hours on a very cold winter's day in Edinburgh, it did take a brave soul to see him. So he was here, of course, as you heard there in Nick's report, to visit the Social Bite Cafe here. His home, it's called Home in Edinburgh, and this was supporting homeless people. He had lunch here. He was also met with Chris Evans and Rob Brydon, who came in. So it was a bit of a celebrity fest here, and I spoke to some of the staff here. They said he was a perfect gentleman, and then he left. He didn't stop for interviews. He did give a wave to his fans. He went over, he spoke to some people. He was signing autographs, signing DVDs. He even signed one person's Leonardo DiCaprio tattoo. She said this was the greatest day of her life.
And was it purely to visit the cafe? Was that the purpose of it, or is there more to this DiCaprio visit to Scotland?
Well, no, aside from all the fanfare, Alistair, there is a serious message behind his visit to Edinburgh today. He is now on his way to the Scottish Business Awards, where he's going to be giving a speech, and that's behind closed doors. But I'm told that he will be talking about global warming, obviously an issue that he is very passionate about, and he is expected to mention Donald Trump, of course, the new president of the United States, who says he doesn't believe in global warming. So Leonardo DiCaprio, much like the last celebrity who came here, George Clooney, sees himself as a celebrity with a social conscience, and he will be delivering that message in Edinburgh this afternoon.
Peter, thank you. Now, you may have seen Peter's Twitter address flash up there during his live report for us. It's worth taking a look at some of his other tweets this morning, because we had one very excited correspondent on our hands. A reminder of his address is there on the screen at the moment. And finally, from Leonardo DiCaprio, going a long way for a coffee, to a daredevil breaking a world record, dunking a biscuit in his tea. Armed with a bungee rope and a chocolate hobnob, Simon Berry from Sheffield made history by starting his descent 75 metres above the ground. He reached the cup with just inches to spare. To watch that in full and find out about the other new world records that have been set, go to itv.com/news. Just a quick reminder of our main stories this lunchtime. The family of Jo Cox have been in court as eyewitnesses told of her killing, describing how the MP was repeatedly stabbed by a man who shouted "Britain first" before calmly walking away. Thomas Mair denies the charges against him. And former police chief Sir Norman Bettison has claimed that he is a whipping boy in the ongoing Hillsborough investigation. The families of the victims say he deserves no sympathy.
He should go away, he should stop looking for sympathy that he doesn't deserve, and he should stop trying to give us sympathy that we don't want when it's not meant.
And that is it this lunchtime. The ITV Evening News is at 6:30, but for now, from all of us, bye-bye.